Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. You already know who it is and who it ain't. The blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So here's the deal, y'all. You see the title, and this is about the type of separation that needs to be promoted and called for. The separation, I've already said before that racially speaking, I'm leaving it up to the black community at large, black admixed and black unmixed alike, to determine whether or not there's going to be a separate racial category for people of my phenotype and people of an actual admixed genotype, even if it doesn't show up obviously. So I've said before that I'm going to leave this up to y'all. I still have no reason to change my stance on it. When I have reason to do so, I'll do it. I still am going to give a shout out though to Caesar Cannon, because what I pick up from Caesar Cannon, and I'm not saying it's due to regional bias either, because we're both from the Gulf Coast and not far from each other, but due to what I've listened to him say and how I've listened to him say it, is that even though there is a class divide between he and I in our childhoods, this is something that's not voluntary. I did not choose to be born amongst the black Huxtables of black America. At the time, it was black America unquestioned. And he did not choose to be born into the Calio projects in New Orleans. And the Calio projects are infamous all along the Gulf Coast. From when I was coming up, I wouldn't say that in Houston they knew a whole lot about the Calio projects up until the 90s. But in Lake Charles, they knew about the Calio projects in the early 90s. Now, Lake Charles is right across the river from Orange, Texas. It's right across the Sabine River from Orange, Texas, where James Byrd got dragged. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons they dragged James Byrd in Orange was because in Orange, Texas, they thought they might be able to get away with it, but across the river in Lake Charles, there's no way they would have gotten away with it. And it would have been riots had that happened. Especially if they'd gotten away with it. But that's another story for another day. I'm just saying that I'm going to tip my hat to Louisiana Negroes and give credit where it's due. They've been fighting the white man since before it was popular, all shades of them. But Caesar Cannon did not choose where he was born and grew up, and I did not choose where I was born and grew up. But we both decided that we're not going to take the biases of our particular classes and try to justify them like they're okay. And so he does not have an anti-intellectual, anti-education approach and an anti-improvement approach. And I do not have an elitist and nose in the air approach. And since both of us have made the conscious effort without knowing each other to not take environmental biases in which we were raised into adulthood and into our causes, I got to tip my hat and say, well, the intention is good. His call for a separate community and even his petition for a separate community is justified by what he knows. And to be fair, he lives in the United States, although New Orleans is oftentimes joked about as being a different country. Those are jokes. Legally, it is a part of the U.S. That's where he lives. I left the United States. And as a matter of fact, the airport out of which I flew wasn't too far from the New Orleans airport. The second cheapest airport I was able to, when I flew over here to start my job, the second cheapest airport out of which I could fly was the Baton Rouge airport. So I remember that day. I still remember it. I remember what the weather was like the day I left. But it was still a long time ago, and I admit I've not lived there since then. And at that time in life, there was no such thing as a call to form a separate racial community and racial category. And so I tip my hat to him because of his intention. he means well. There's nothing to knock when it comes to that. I may have a different idea about tactics, but hell, he's trying his tactic, I'll try mine. One of them will work better and first. But the reason I'm recording this today is to talk to you about the actual separation of which I'm sure that we need. And it became clear to me twice. It became clear to me once, about a year ago when I was talking about colorism. It became clear to me again yesterday as Fula Sports, shout out to the brother, assalamu alaikum, man, was helping me out. And Jeremiah again for doing so, and on short notice too, was helping me out to inform you guys of the antichrist-like nature of Nature Boy, and to not underestimate the dangers that little mini antichrist poses. And for the record, Nature Boy, I'm going to be trolling you. When I find the time, I'm going to troll you. I'm going to go on your channel. If you're awake and I'm sorry, if you go live and I'm awake and free at the same time, I'm going to go on your channel and troll your chat. Straight like that. You're probably going to wind up blocking me. But that's your fault with your megalomaniac, narcissistic, blasphemous, wannabe antichrist behind. Wannabe niggerilla. Because that doesn't exist, but you want to make it exist. And the only place it ever existed in the beginning was in the white supremacist fantasies of the white supremacists. Mostly in the white supremacist fantasies of the slave owners who knew that at some point they were going to get their just desserts. Who started and believed the propagandist lie that we were more savage due to our shade. And you went right along with this stuff. But anyway, it became clear to me that an ideological separation is necessary, as I've said before. The attitude towards education, intellectualism, actually learning things, attitudes about what is fair and just and who does and does not deserve what based on, matter of fact, attitudes of people choosing what they deserve by the moral choices they make is more important to us than a DNA sequence and whatever phenotype shows from that genotype. See, the DNA and the genetic sequence and the actual alleles of each gene that are present and in the order in which they're present, that's what you call the genotype. The phenotype is what's obvious to someone looking from the outside in. So, in other words, the genotype is what's in the DNA from both parents. The phenotype is what you pass as. And I'm going to tell y'all straight, more important than the genotype or the phenotype is the basic understanding of morality, and even chimps have an understanding of it. Capuchin monkeys have shown that they have an understanding of it. You cannot give Capuchin monkeys similar task or the same task and then turn around and reward the same tasks unequally. An experiment showed this. They don't tolerate that. Chimps don't tolerate it. Experiments have shown that chimps do have an understanding of agency and choice and a sense of fairness, and they will pitch a further mucking fit if somebody shows selfishness and unfairness. So we human beings are certainly capable of that. And what we've seen is that the Western European Wyatts don't have that. They're born with it, but they ignore it. So a question of some sort of unity and blending in with them and being absorbed by them is not even a question. The real question is, how do we lose that same understanding with which human beings and even some lower species are born if we're born with it? You see, even though Nature Boy has only 88,000, he's the example. He's not the pattern. He's an example of the pattern against which you're going to see me going. And if I'm telling you that Islam is a solution for our people, if you apply it, I have to admit that when I don't apply it, it's null and void as a solution. But I also have to admit that right is right and wrong is wrong. Now, we know what that means. And this guy here, along with others in our community, will bend the definition of what is right and what is wrong to suit themselves and their wants and their wishes and their desires. And they get justified too often and too easily by us. And this is a further mucking shame. Fact is, R. Kelly's had a thing for underage girls for a while, according to evidence. Now, there were people that did not know, and I understood that. There were people that said, these are rumors. I'm not going off rumors. And that's fine. But I'm going to say this too. One of the reasons why that ideological break is going to be necessary, whether you are black admixed or black unmixed, that ideological break is necessary for both of us. That separation is necessary. I shouldn't even say both, because the question of it being both, as if those two are really going to be two different races, might become null and void if we first all practice this ideological moral separation. And to show you that I mean it, I cut my own cousin off. For what? Ninja sat up and insulted Muhammad. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't insult Jesus. I don't insult Moses. Matter of fact, I belong to the only non-Christian faith that makes it an article of faith to accept the prophecy of the previous prophets once they're mentioned by name in the Quran, which mentions many of the ones that are in the Bible, Old or New Testament. Yeah. So he had insulted them. I would have cut him off if he had insulted Moses. Peace be to him. If he had insulted Solomon, peace be to him. If he had insulted David, peace be to him. The only exceptions I might have made would have been if he had said something that was in the Old or the New Testament about them, because at least then I would say, well, he's coming out of one of the books, even though they've been corrupted, he's coming out of something that someone else corrupted. But no, he decided he was going to come and go in on a prophet and say something that's not in any of his own books that he's accepted. Cut him off. I remember that. That was actually the morning that I was about to go and travel back to the States a few months ago. I remember waking up, going through Facebook after I was done praying, and saw this and said, damn, I got to cut this ninja off. But hey, rules are rules. That's a capital punishment in the Sharia. I cut him off. So what I say to you, I'm willing to walk. And the truth be told, I actually find this walk easier to walk than to not walk. All of us are going to not know something about something wrong that somebody else did. All of us are going to know something wrong that someone else did, but it ain't a reason you cut them off as much as it is a reason you advise them and tell them, hey, bro, get your stuff together. And then they're just egregious sins by any definition, moral outrages by any community standards. Blasphemy, genocide, oppression, justification of these things, saying that they're right. These are outrages by any community standards. Even Wyatts will tell you that these things are moral outrages. They just might not care, depending on to whom these things are done, but they know they're moral outrages. So there's no question as to whether or not a moral outrage is a moral outrage. And what I'm saying is we're going to have to split up based on that first. That's a necessity. And I'm going to say this too. If there's going to be a racial recategorization, sisters, let me tell you something. Black admixed sisters, I realize you've been going through a lot because you're women. And women go at each other's throats a lot. I realize this. I also realize that as a phenotypical minority, you've never had a reason to go in on black unmixed women. You wouldn't get away with it. You don't find a reason to do it. Your aunts, grandmoms, somebody in your family that really looked out for you has the same thing. So you wouldn't go off on the phenotype even when someone goes off on yours. I realize you've been in a quandary. A lot of us black admixed men have been in something similar when we were young, when we were kids. Not so much as adults, but as kids we go through this. As adults, it's a lot of jokes, and we're usually allowed to clap back. I only tell black admixed men resort to violence if someone says this stuff and then you can't retaliate back. Just go ahead and hit them. You can't say something back, hit them. Knock them in the mouth, chins preferably, or the forehead. That's usually when I say go ahead. Or when you're physically threatened, especially if you know you're being physically threatened only because they think they can get away with it because of your shade. Yeah, go ahead. You're being singled out for some kind of mistreatment, an unfair treatment. Go ahead and answer that with knuckles. Go ahead. I don't have a problem when someone does that. I wouldn't have a problem if a black admixed man was going off on a black unmixed man just for that reason, and the black unmixed man knocked him the uck out. I'd be all right with it. Right's right, wrong's wrong. But what I want to say though to black admixed women regarding this call, most of you are calling for a recategorization, and understand, Caesar and I are willing to stand up for your right to not be mistreated. He's willing to call for a separate recategorization. I'm willing to leave that particular aspect up to black America as a whole. You, him, and the rest of the community that is black under the current one-drop rule that many of you are calling to throw out. I leave it up to y'all, but he and I both are in your corner as far as your right to not be mistreated in word or in deed based on geno or phenotype. But that does not mean that I'm blind to some of your foolishness. Understand, it is a gender war in the West between that white woman and her white man, not just in the US, but even in Scandinavia and any other first world regions, or first world economies, I should say. And in between black men and black women, it's the same thing. So I'm going to give many of you black admixed women that are calling for this recategorization credit for one thing. Many of you have said, in order to build a community that's going to take men and women and light skin and race mixed and black admixed men, we are not your enemies. We're not going to belittle you. Come home. You at least have had that good sense. And I want you to get full credit for that. But by the same token, I'm listening to what many of you are talking about. And to be honest with you, you are still making one particular mistake. You are still allowing the men to count you as being more important than you count the men to be. That's still a mistake. And I count it as worse than a mistake. I count that as Western female narcissism. And you're still falling victim to that to a certain extent. As I've said, how the communities will be recategorized, I'm leaving to you all. But whether you want to have a sub-community within the black community because we are related to them, that is still the case. And most folks in the black community don't hate us and don't want to kick us out. The real issue is that those who do, from what I observed before I left, most don't hate us and don't want to kick us out, but they're not saying something when somebody decides to say things that are unfair and blame people of our appearance or admixture for things that we didn't do. However, keep this in mind. There's that war that's going on in the West in general. And if we were recategorized tomorrow and had a separate community tomorrow, you have not done the mental legwork it takes to stop that process. You would take in, sorry, that was a phone call. You would take in a lot of the same bad habits without realizing it. And then when you realize it, you probably wouldn't be ready to throw these things aside. I could go more in depth. I'll leave it to you. If you want me to go more in depth about it, say so in the comments. I'll do another recording. If you think you understand what I'm getting at and you're willing to do the mental work to get the bad ideas out your subconscious, then go ahead and just think about it yourself. And if I don't get requests for going more in depth on this, then I won't. I will end by saying regarding the potential forming a community and the gender conflict, actually gender war, that we would stand to inherit from the Western context in which we came about, I would say this before I close out. If you do that, I mean, if you come in with the same attitudes that you're owed protection, but you don't owe the men anything, if you come in with the attitudes that you're going to vilify or demonize men for the male libido when you have a female libido of your own, if you come in with this we take and you give mentality without a you take also and I also give mentality, then black admixed men will have no choice but to leave you by yourself and to get someone else with whom to form a legacy, and the community will not be what you're imagining. You will not necessarily have to tolerate being oppressed and constantly cater to a responsible man. You won't have to, but you will have to show him more appreciation than what you think is okay to show as a modern day Western woman. In other words, you're still gonna have to chuck off that modern day Western portion of your identity when you're at home with your husband. And you're gonna have to also, you're gonna have to do away with a lot of things that you think you're entitled to, even in terms of just opinions. Because if you have the same mate selection criteria that other Western women have, you're gonna run your man off, because that's what every other woman's doing right now. You're just not aware of it. But that's what you're gonna wind up doing. And I don't want you to make that mistake. If you're trying to form some kind of community, if you mean well, if you're one that doesn't mean well for men and only for yourselves, and which is why I see a lot of arguing over male attention, but not over males, arguing over male resources, but not over males, and that's what you're fine with, fit the guck out my face with that show bit and stop calling for anything at all, and just admit you a hoe. If that's your mindset. Because all of y'all ain't the same. I really do want justice for just people. I want justice for people in general. And I want just people to never have to be punished for being just. That is the motive behind me tackling this issue. It is not to win points with you. I can't. I already know that. And one of the things about being anonymous is that I'm not going to win points with you that are going to translate into any benefit in real life. And I'm cool with that, because this is about justice for me. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black, admixed and unmixed, heterosexual, non-select male power, just because you may not like it, and black, admixed or unmixed, patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.